I trusted her with my heart, and she used it as a joke for everyone to laugh at. I never believed love could turn cruel so quietly. At first, everything felt perfect, almost like a dream. I still remember the first time we met, the spark, the laughter, the endless talks that lasted into the night. She listened to me like I was the only person who mattered, and I believed her. Every word she said, every smile she shared, made me feel like I had found someone who truly understood me. We weren't rich, and our lives weren't glamorous. We didn't have fancy vacations or designer clothes. What we had was simpler, but at that time, I thought it was enough. We had comfort, and comfort felt like forever. I thought we were building a life together, brick by brick, promise by promise. Late night calls, inside jokes that no one else understood. Small gestures of love, it all felt so real. I was naive, perhaps. I thought loyalty was mutual because that's what love is supposed to be, isn't it? I never imagined that someone who claimed to love me could turn that love into entertainment, into a tool to humiliate. At first there were small hints, things that I didn't notice at the time. Texts she hid when I walked into the room. Laughs that seemed too loud, as if she was performing for someone else. Moments when she seemed distracted, more interested in her phone than in the conversation we were having. I ignored them. I told myself she was just busy, that I was overthinking, that love meant trust and patience. But slowly, very slowly, the cracks started to show. Her attention shifted. Her priorities changed. I started feeling like I was losing her, even though I didn't fully understand why. One day, I noticed something that made my heart sink. Messages from someone I didn't know, filled with flirtatious words and a casual familiarity that made my stomach twist. My first reaction was denial. There was no way this could be happening. Not to me. Not to the person I loved and trusted the most. As days passed, the truth became impossible to ignore. She wasn't just seeking attention, she was cheating on me, and the worst part, she didn't even seem sorry. She was openly sharing her time and affection with someone else, as if our love had never meant anything. And the humiliation didn't stop there. She made subtle jokes in front of friends, comments that hinted at my overreaction whenever I questioned her, laughter at my expense. It was as though my heartbreak was her entertainment. One day, I walked into a room full of friends, laughing at something they thought was funny. At first, I didn't understand. Then I realized the joke was about me. They were laughing at my love, my trust, my loyalty, and she was smiling, enjoying every second. The person I gave my heart to, the person I believed would never hurt me, was now publicly mocking me. That moment, the public humiliation, is something I can never forget. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the mockery, the laughter, the casual way she tore me down in front of people who I thought were my friends. It was as if everything we had shared was a performance, and I had been the unwitting actor in her cruel play. After that day, I withdrew. I stopped sharing my thoughts. I stopped being vulnerable. The walls I had once let her climb now became barriers to everyone. I felt exposed, humiliated, and alone. It was a pain I didn't know how to process. I questioned my worth, my judgment, my very ability to trust. Nights became long and restless. I replayed every conversation, every moment, wondering where I had gone wrong. Yet, amidst the hurt, something inside me began to change. I realized that I had two choices: remain broken letting this experience define me or find a way to survive, to grow stronger, to reclaim my life. I chose the latter, though at the time it felt impossible. I started small. I focused on myself. I rebuilt routines that made me feel alive. Exercise, work, hobbies, things I had neglected while wrapped up in a love that had turned toxic. I surrounded myself with people who valued honesty and kindness. I learned that self-respect isn't given. It's earned, even from oneself. The process was slow, almost painfully so. Each day was a battle between the urge to lash out, to scream, to confront her, and the understanding that real strength comes from silence and perseverance. I wrote in my journal, poured my emotions into words no one else would see. I cried when I needed to, but I also forced myself to take small steps forward. Months passed, and gradually, the laughter that once haunted me began to fade. I could walk past the people who had mocked me without feeling the same sharp sting. I could see her name mentioned online and not feel that old surge of hurt. Life had begun to heal the wounds that had felt like they would never close. I won't lie, the betrayal left scars. Some nights, memories still haunt me. But those scars are not weaknesses. They are reminders of how far I've come. I survived public humiliation, betrayal, and mockery. I learned the value of loyalty, honesty, and, most importantly, self-worth. Now, looking back, I understand that love can teach both joy and pain. Sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones who hurt us, intentionally or not. But surviving that hurt, growing from it, and reclaiming our own power, that is the real story worth telling. And little did I know, this journey of heartbreak and self-discovery was only the beginning. The story wasn't over. What she had done to me, and how she had mocked me publicly, would come back in ways I could never have predicted years later. The stage was set for a twist I didn't see coming. The betrayal, the mockery, the pain, all of it was preparing me for the real lesson. That time has a way of giving closure to those who survive. Cheating hurts. But being mocked for trusting someone hurts even more. I never imagined that betrayal could be public. That the very person I loved, trusted, and gave everything to would take my vulnerability and turn it into entertainment. At first, it was subtle whispers behind my back, comments that hinted at jokes I didn't understand. But soon, the subtlety vanished, replaced by open humiliation. And I became the center of laughter I never asked for. It started in ways I couldn't fully recognize at first. A mutual friend would chuckle while I was talking, glancing at her. She'd smile knowingly. Another time, someone sent me a screenshot of a conversation she had shared, private words I had trusted her with, now distorted and mocked by others. Every revelation was like a small cut, adding to the invisible weight pressing on my chest. Being betrayed privately is one thing, but when everyone around you, friends, acquaintances, even strangers, becomes aware, it's a completely different kind of pain. The humiliation wasn't just emotional, it became social. People I thought cared for me treated my heartbreak like a spectacle. They laughed when I walked by, sometimes whispering just loud enough for me to hear. And she would smile. Sometimes she wouldn't even try to hide it. My suffering had become her amusement. I wanted to speak up, to defend myself, to explain my side of the story. But every attempt I made seemed to backfire. Words became inadequate. Any reaction I had was used as more material for jokes. Trying to reclaim my dignity only made me look more desperate in their eyes. So I withdrew, I became quiet. I became invisible in a room where laughter echoed, directed at me. Sleep became elusive. Nights were the worst. I would lie awake, replaying every interaction, every joke, every whispered comment. I asked myself over and over, how did I not see it coming? How could someone I trusted so completely betray me so openly? The questions had no answers, and the uncertainty gnawed at me. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and utterly alone. What hurt even more than the betrayal itself was the mockery of my emotions. People laughed at my trust. They laughed at my love. They laughed at my hope. And the person responsible didn't feel a shred of guilt. In fact, she seemed to enjoy it. She thrived on the attention, relishing the control she had over my dignity. Each laugh at my expense felt like a punch that no one else could see but me. I started to notice the subtle social shifts around me. Invitations I once received stopped coming. Friends I trusted began avoiding me or treating me differently. The reason wasn't hard to guess. The story had spread, twisted into something that made me seem weak, naive, and laughable. And she was at the center of it, the one orchestrating the narrative while I struggled to pick up the pieces of my self-respect. At this point, I realized that anger alone wouldn't save me. Anger would only make me react, and reaction meant more humiliation. The more I tried to defend myself, the more ammunition she and others found to mock me. I needed a different approach, one that didn't involve confrontation, but survival. I began focusing on silence, on self. I limited interactions. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped sharing my feelings. It wasn't resignation. It was strategy. Every insult, every joke, every whisper became a test of endurance. And I learned to endure. Slowly, quietly, I built walls around my vulnerability, not to shut people out forever, but to protect myself until I could rebuild the life that had been torn apart. Isolation became my temporary refuge. At first it was painful. I felt disconnected, abandoned by everyone. But in that solitude, I discovered a strange clarity. I started observing the world differently, noticing who truly cared, and who only thrived on entertainment at the expense of others. I realized that mockery often comes from insecurity, jealousy, or boredom, not truth. And for the first time, I began to separate the opinions of others. During this time, I focused on small victories. Getting out of bed some days felt like a battle, but I forced myself to face it. I completed tasks I had delayed. I exercised not just for health, but to regain control over my body and mind. I revisited old hobbies and passions that had been neglected, finding in them small pieces of myself that I thought were lost forever. I also started writing long, personal letters I would never send. I poured every emotion, every hurt, every tear into the pages. It became therapy, a way to process the humiliation without adding fuel to the fire. Every word written helped me reclaim a part of my dignity that had been stripped away in front of others. Months turned into a year. The intensity of the public mockery began to fade, not because people suddenly grew kind, but because I stopped giving them the power to affect me. I learned a vital lesson. Control over your emotions is more powerful than control over anyone else's perception of you. Despite all of this, the wound didn't fully close. I still carried pain, even as I learned to live with it. Social events were challenging. Seeing her in public triggered memories I couldn't erase. But each encounter strengthened my resolve. I realized that life is not about the people who laugh at you. It's about how you respond to the laughter. During this period, I also noticed a subtle change in myself. I was becoming stronger, not because I sought revenge, but because I was surviving. I had learned patience, resilience, and the power of emotional independence. And perhaps most importantly, I had learned that true strength comes not from humiliation avoided, but from humiliation endured and overcome, her public mockery. The laughter, the betrayal, it had shaped me. It had forced me to confront the deepest fears I never wanted to face. But it had also prepared me for something unexpected, a life where my confidence and self-respect would no longer depend on anyone else's opinion. That the irony of it all was clear. She had intended to humiliate me, to show everyone that I was weak. Yet, in doing so, she unknowingly created the conditions for my transformation. The very actions that were meant to break me had, in fact, built a stronger, more resilient version of myself. By the end of this chapter of my life, I was no longer the same person who walked into that room, naive and trusting. I had learned that life doesn't hand out apologies or fairness, it hands out lessons, and it was time to move forward, not with anger, but with the quiet power that comes from surviving and growing stronger silently. While the world thought I was defeated, this chapter was the darkest, most painful period of my life, but it was also the foundation for everything that would come next. The humiliation, the betrayal, the public mockery, they had all been lessons in disguise. And little did I know, years later, the story would take an unexpected turn, one that would bring closure, reflection, and a lesson in the kind of strength that no one can take away. While she was laughing, I was quietly changing into someone she would never recognize. The months of humiliation and heartbreak had taught me one important lesson. Pain can either break you or rebuild you. I chose to rebuild. Not for revenge, not to prove her wrong, but simply to reclaim the life that had been stolen from me, and to remind myself that I still mattered. The journey wasn't fast. Growth never is. At first, it was about small things, waking up on time, completing tasks I had procrastinated, and finding little victories in daily routines. But these small victories began to accumulate, creating momentum that carried me forward in ways I had never imagined. I started to prioritize myself, not in a selfish way, but in a way that reminded me that my happiness and self-worth didn't depend on her or anyone else. I invested in my mind, body, and soul. Exercise became more than a routine. It was therapy. Reading, writing, and learning new skills became a way to reclaim control over my life. Slowly, I rebuilt the foundation of my confidence, brick by brick, step by step. I also learned the importance of surrounding myself with the right people. I cut ties with those who thrived on gossip, who laughed at my pain, or who never stood by me. I gravitated toward people who valued honesty, loyalty, and empathy, individuals who lifted me up rather than tearing me down. Their support became a reminder that not everyone in the world would betray me, and that real friendships could exist even after betrayal. As I focused on personal growth, I realized something profound. She had underestimated me completely. The person she thought she had broken was quietly evolving into someone stronger, someone resilient, someone capable of thriving despite the scars she had left. While she was enjoying temporary attention and amusement, I was building a life with purpose, meaning, and self-respect. Time passed, and I started to see tangible results. Opportunities began to open up, professionally, socially, and emotionally. I achieved milestones I had once dreamed of, pursued goals I had shelved, and embraced challenges I had previously avoided. Each accomplishment reinforced the understanding that my value was independent of her recognition or approval. It wasn't just external achievements that defined this transformation. Internally, I was learning to manage my emotions in a healthy way. I stopped dwelling on the past. I stopped letting anger and resentment control my actions. Forgiveness, initially unthinkable, became a tool for my own peace, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to move forward without carrying the weight of bitterness. And then, unexpectedly, life threw a twist. I heard her name again, not through mutual friends or random encounters, but through a direct message, an attempt to reconnect. She reached out after years of silence, and it was clear from the tone that her life had not gone as smoothly as she had imagined. The attention she had once chased had faded. The social validation she had relied on was gone, and for the first time, she faced consequences that she hadn't anticipated. Her message wasn't dramatic or confrontational. It was hesitant, tinged with regret. She admitted mistakes she had never acknowledged before, confessions she had never voiced when it mattered. She spoke of lost friendships, lost trust, and lost opportunities. And somewhere in her words, I sensed genuine remorse, a recognition of the hurt she had caused, and perhaps a wish to make amends. I read her words quietly. I didn't respond immediately. I reflected on everything: the betrayal, the mockery, the long nights of loneliness, the gradual rebuilding of my life. I realized something crucial. Her regret no longer held power over me. The person she had tried to humiliate was no longer the same. I had grown beyond the pain she inflicted. In that moment, I understood the true nature of closure. Closure doesn't come from her apology. Closure doesn't come from her suffering. Closure comes from our own transformation, from reaching a state where the past no longer dictates our emotions or actions. The real victory wasn't seeing her regret. It was realizing that I had survived, grown, and thrived, independently of her. This unexpected turn in our story also reinforced another lesson. Life has a way of balancing itself. People who mock, betray, or underestimate others often face their own reckoning. Not because we seek it, but because life naturally corrects itself. Meanwhile, those who endure, learn, and grow often find that their strength, resilience, and self-respect are the true rewards. The next months were an exercise in living with dignity and peace. I didn't chase her or demand recognition. I didn't flaunt my success or highlight her mistakes. I simply lived, and in living fully, authentically, and confidently, I discovered something remarkable: the satisfaction of being untouchable by her past actions. As my personal and professional life flourished, I also noticed subtle changes in my social world. People who once doubted me began to see the quiet transformation. Opportunities appeared, doors opened, and relationships strengthened. And yet, the most significant change wasn't external. It was internal, a sense of unshakable self-worth that no external validation could compromise. I also began sharing my experiences in safe, controlled ways with friends, mentors, and even online communities where people had faced betrayal or humiliation. The response was overwhelming. Many resonated with my journey. Many found hope in the idea that public humiliation is not the end of the story. Through sharing, I realized that pain can be transformed into a tool for inspiration and growth, that even the darkest chapters can produce lessons for others. Looking back, I recognized a pivotal truth. The person who hurt us, who mocked us, who betrayed us, often does so not out of malice alone, but out of ignorance, insecurity, or immaturity. Their actions reflect more about their flaws than our value. Understanding this allowed me to release resentment, while still honoring the lessons of the past. By the end of this period of growth, healing, and unexpected reflection, I was a completely different person from the one who had once been mocked. I had regained my confidence, my purpose, and my emotional stability. And perhaps most importantly, I had developed the inner strength to face the world without fear of betrayal or humiliation. Life, as it turned out, was preparing me for something far more meaningful than revenge. It was preparing me for a future where I could live with integrity, dignity, and resilience, where the actions of others could no longer dictate my happiness.